The crypto market got hit hard last week, and while I don't think the comic book market is going to crash anytime soon, there are still some takeaways that we can learn from this. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another video with Swaggle. And in this video, we're going to talk about the recent crypto market crash and 5 things that I learned that I'm going to apply to comic book collecting here in this video today. But before I get into the topic, if you guys could drop me a like or a comment or subscribe if you're enjoying the content, help support the channel, do one of those things, and I would appreciate it. All right, with that said, let's get into this here today. For those who don't know, crypto had a tough week last week. The stock of all of those cryptocurrencies definitely took a big plunge, and of the time of recording this video, it's still a little bit up in the air of whether or not the crypto market is going to continue to go down or maybe it's going to bounce back up. Nobody really knows. Now, I myself am a fan of cryptocurrency. I do have some crypto that I've invested in personally. So for those out there who also have crypto, I'm feeling it with you here today. But with that said, I do think that there are some interesting things that kind of emerged from this recent crash as far as like what I learned and what I'm able to sort of take away. And I kind of wanted to apply some of those learned things over to the comic book collecting market because, we've had conversations on this channel before about whether or not comic books are in a bubble and whether or not, comics are going to crash. And while I don't think that comics are going to crash anytime soon, certainly not to the level that this recent crypto crash has occurred at. But I do think that there are some interesting things that we can kind of learn from the crypto crash and apply them to comic books here today. So I got 5 things that I'm going to kind of talk about here today, and let's get into it. All right. So the first one here I have as a learned moment for the crypto crash as I apply it to comic books is FUD shakes belief. FUD shakes belief. Well, what does that really mean? Now, FUD, for those who don't know, is an acronym for fear, uncertainty, and doubt. That is typically what people in the crypto world will always say. They'll always say, oh, there's FUD, fear, uncertainty, and doubt. And that's something that's really interesting as it applies to comic books because for those who don't know, one of the reasons why the crypto market started to crash recently, at least, this is one of the things that people talk about as one of the reasons, is that Elon Musk, who rewind the clock a couple months ago, was a fan of crypto. He had recently bought a lot of Bitcoin. He recently said that Bitcoin is very energy inefficient, and that caused a lot of like fear and uncertainty, and everyone was kind of thinking, oh no, Elon Musk is no longer bullish on Bitcoin, he's going to sell. And that's really was one of the first things that kind of was the catalyst to why the crypto market started to crash. And then from there you got other news cycle items that came in, like, oh, China was going to ban crypto, and then there was some like negative news over here, like, oh, Ethereum doesn't work, and then like, oh, Tether is actually not backed by whatever. I don't need to go into all the specifications with you guys here today, but needless to say, basically there was a lot of negative news about crypto, and that caused a lot of people, I think, to kind of panic sell, or a lot of people started to have, a lot of doubt within the space. Now, as I think about this here for comic books, I do think that this is really interesting, and there are similarities. So if we take like, the recent pandemic, a lot of the comic book market always is speccing on those books that have movies and properties, right? And because of this recent pandemic, a lot of the movies have been pushed out, right? Morbius, Venom, Black Widow, things like that all got really pushed back. And if I look at some of the books that apply to those movies, for instance, first appearance of Morbius, first appearance of Black Widow, there has actually been a little bit of a dive in terms of the value of those books. Like when we first got that Morbius trailer, the value of those books was absolutely like through the roof. But as we kept getting news about, oh, this property is going to get pushed out, oh, it's going to come out later in the year, what we actually started to see was, the value of that book started to really slowly decline, which is interesting because, we still are going to get this movie. We still know that this book is special. We still know that this book has value, kind of like with like a Bitcoin. We still think that Bitcoin is a great store of value, or we still think Ethereum is the future of the internet. But even with fear, uncertainty, and doubt, even with FUD, even with negative news, people still emotionally are less bullish on the crypto, or in this case the comic book. So that's really interesting to me. Definitely with fear, uncertainty, and doubt within comic books, those books can definitely take a little bit of a hit. Similarly, when we have news that is like, oh, we're going to get this show, or we're going to get, hey, DC is, going to be making whatever, Static or Naomi or whatever it is, people get really bullish on that. But then when you have things like, oh, the Zack Snyder universe is going to no longer be around, it's going to be canceled, you see all these DC books like slowly taking a dive, which is really interesting because it's like, it's not like these books ever really needed the movies to have value anyways. But when there is negative news attention surrounding certain properties and certain books, people start to get, bearish on those particular collectibles. And that's when people start to sell, and that's when the price starts to go down. So FUD can definitely shake belief and hurt the value. All right, let's go on now to the second thing I learned here. And the second thing I learned is also very interesting. New investors are the first to go. New investors are the first to go. Now, this was something that I thought was really interesting with regards to, cryptocurrencies. Now, excuse me, I don't know where I got this source, but there was a lot of discussion around, they were able to pull this in data and the analytics of who were the people that when all this bad FUD came into this recent crypto crash, who were the people that actually sold? And what they were able to kind of find out was the majority of people that sold their cryptocurrency are mostly new crypto investors. So people who maybe kind of got into crypto within the last kind of year, and we're just, kind of riding this bull market all the way to the top. Most of the people who sold or panic sold their crypto are the people who are new to the market. The people who have been in crypto for, many years, who have kind of rode out this, the bull and bear markets for, since all the way back in 2010, those people are still, the ones with the diamond hands. They're still the people that are hanging around. And as I think about this for comic books, I think that this is probably likely to be very true as well. Currently we have the MCU. Super hot. Everybody loves the movies. Comic book market is exploding. People are really bullish on the collecting comics overall. But I do think that if there is ever a time when the comic book market does crash, or let's say the MCU, no longer is around, or whatever, Kevin Feige retires and they're not going to make Marvel movies anymore. I do think that the people who are the newest comic book collectors are going to be the first ones who leave the hobby, because those are the ones that kind of got into it with the surge of the films and everything like that, and those are probably the ones that are going to be the first to leave to jump onto whatever other hobby they want to do after comic books. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's just kind of clear that the people who have always been in the collecting industry are going to stay in the collecting industry, whether or not the books go up or down, whether or not they keep making movies. It doesn't really matter. The people who are been in here the longest are going to be the ones that hang around for the long haul. All right, let's go on now to the third thing I learned here. And this one is also very interesting. This is what goes up must come down, then up again. What goes up must come down, then up again. This is something that I think is really interesting with regards to sort of all investments, whether they are stocks or housing, real estate, or comic books, or crypto in this particular case. What goes up must come down. I mean, nothing is ever stagnant, right? There's no price that is ever just going to sit like this and this is always going to be the value, or there's no stock or crypto or whatever it is that's always going to continue to rise and rise and rise at the same rate that it's exploding at. That's just not how the economy works. That's not how velocity of money works. And so everything that goes up eventually is going to come down at some point. But with that said, over the long haul, things always go up again just by the sheer nature of the value of the dollar and inflation. So when we look at the crypto market, it recently just blew up this past year, totally went to the moon. And then like things do, when they go up, they must come down, and it crashed down to where it is here today. But the thing is like when you look at the graphs for any type of stock, any type of investable asset, you're always going to see peaks and valleys. But over the long haul, generally speaking, especially with regards to like the US stock market, it's always going to be on a steady incline overall. So same for comic books. I think that we're in this market where we're seeing a lot of green, a lot of things going to the moon, going super high up, and there will be a time for sure, not necessarily a crash, so to speak, but there will be that correction and things will definitely come down. But if we're looking at the long haul, like I'm talking like 30 years from now, whatever Amazing Fantasy 15 is here today at the time of recording, whether it's, low grade, it's like 20 grand or whatever, it might come back down to whatever, 15 grand at some point, or hey, maybe even 10 grand if nobody cares about Spider-Man. But if we're moving forward, 30, 40 years from now, I'm still of the mind that this 20 grand AF-15 is going to be double that, just by the nature of inflation and value of the dollar. I mean, you don't need people to get even more bullish on Amazing Spider-Man 15. It's going to increase in its value because the nature of inflation. All right, let's go on now to the next thing I learned here, and this one is also very, very interesting. You only lose or gain when you sell. You only lose or gain when you sell. This is definitely something that is really funny to me. We got to talk about unrealized gains or unrealized losses. When you buy a stock, or in this case, when you buy some crypto and it goes up, you're like, oh, I made whatever, $500, I made $1,000, but really it's all unrealized. Until you sell that stock, you've actually made nothing. There's actually nothing in your pocket. So similarly, if you invest in something and it goes down and you're like, oh, I lost $500. You actually didn't lose $500. You just lost this unrealized loss, essentially. There's this unrealized loss with regards to your portfolio. If you just wait it out and perhaps it goes up again, then you'd be none the wiser. You wouldn't have lost anything. So similarly here for comic books, what I think is really interesting is, we always spec on comic books. We're always like, oh, I'm going to go pick up this hot, spec book. And then later on, it's going to be worth, 5X or 10X or whatever the case may be. But the reality is this, is that you actually didn't increase your value until you sell that comic book, or you didn't cash in on your gain until you actually sell that comic book. Similarly, let's say you buy a hot book today, and then 6 months from now, it falls off the cliff, and then the value of the book plummets. Well, you didn't actually lose value either. You might have committed your money to it, but you still, until you sell that comic book or sell that asset, you're actually not going to have quote unquote lost that money, because it might rise again eventually. So that's something that's really interesting, is like, unrealized gains, unrealized losses. That's why they call it that. It's all unrealized. So until you sell, you actually haven't lost or gained any money at all. All right, now let's go on out to the last thing that I learned from the recent crypto market crash. Just hodl. Just hodl. The market's crashing, or things going up, or things going down. But at the end of the day, like, if you are someone who believes in this thing, whether it's cryptocurrency or you believe in comic books, you are passionate about this hobby, you are an investor, or even just a flipper or specker or whatever, ultimately, if you are someone who feels like the intrinsic value of comic books are there for them, or they have this value, just hodl, man. Just hodl. Just hold on to the book. Like, that's really what it all comes down to. Like, if you want to own this stuff, just hold on to it, and eventually, that book will get hot again, or some property will boost it, or even if the MCU folds tomorrow, eventually 20 years from now, someone, the next Kevin Feige is going to restart the MCU. I mean, that's just what's going to happen. I mean, look at things like Star Wars or whatever. It's like, even if there's ups and downs within the interest of these markets, there will always be a resurgence. How many times is Hollywood reinventing old properties like Godzilla or Predator or whatever? Like, even if the MCU crashes tomorrow, 20 years from now, they're going to reboot it, and they're going to do it again. And that next generation will get into comic book collecting, and will get into the properties. And if you're someone who just hodls over the years, you will never really lose your value. Anyways, that is all I have for this video. That was sort of applying my crypto market crash takeaways to the comic book industry. Hopefully you guys found this video kind of interesting or fun to talk about. Let me know what you guys think. Are there any crypto fans out there? I'm definitely just someone who's just going to hodl my crypto. I'm in it for the long haul, and I'm in comic books for the long haul. I love my 2 grails I got behind me, and I'm never selling these things. I'm just going to hodl them. Anyways, that is all I have for this video. Drop me a like, comment, subscribe if you're enjoying the content, and I will see you in the next one.